I'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Mesilla Valley MPO Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities Advisory Committee to order. If we can just introduce our members, let's start at the end.
Vanessa Morales Romero, City of Las Cruces.
Albert Casillas, Doña County Representative.
Jim Wilcox, Bicycle Representative.
Andrew Guerra, NMDOT.
Sulana Acosta, NMSU.
And George Pearson, City of Las Cruces Representative. We have approval of the agenda. Are there any changes for the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair, we do not have any changes.
I'll hear a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Jim Wilcox, I motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Albert Casillas, second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the agenda as presented. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we have approval of the minutes of our August 20th meeting. I guess according to Robert's rules, we should do the motion and the second first and then discussion. Since we had our training from the city clerk at our previous meeting. So I'll hear a motion to approve the minutes.
Albert Casillas, I motion to approve the minutes of August 20th, 2024.
Jim Wilcox, second that emotion. Oh, second that motion.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Now we're on to item 4, public comment. Anyone from the public wish to make a comment at this point? Seeing none, we move on to action items. We have performance measure 1, safety targets.
Mr. Andrew Ray is going to give a brief introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Andrew Ray. For the record, I want to offer an apology to the BPAC for this item. I am on the record at the August meeting as having said that I didn't believe that we were going to be doing safety targets this year, as my impression from the May meeting, the May target setting meeting for the state of New Mexico, plus the, at that time, impending state of New Mexico safety conference, I had been led to believe that we were not going to be setting a target this year other than 0. However, that proved not to be the case. The state of New Mexico did set targets for calendar year 2025 above what I expected of 0. So we are presenting this agenda item for action and recommendation. Because of the cancellation, which I also apologize for, that happened due to the election and our inability to access the chamber in October, we were not able to bring this as a discussion item before the BPAC. So with those 2 apologies in hand, I want to at this time introduce Ms. Kaprovinki.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the BPAC. This is the Mesilla Valley MPO 2025 Safety Performance Measures, also known as the targets. 23 CFR 490 requires each MPO to set performance measures for safety. In 2023, the Mesilla Valley MPO adopted performance measures for calendar year 2024. These safety performance measures must be adopted annually. The safety performance measure requires that measures or the targets be adopted in the following areas: number of fatalities, number of serious injuries, rate of fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, rate of serious injuries per 100 million VMT, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. The New Mexico Department of Transportation has released its proposed metrics for 2025. FHWA states, so there were methodology changes from last year. This is just a review. FHWA states performance measures are required to be identical between the HSP, NHTSA, and HSIP. Changes created by the IJA require HSP to cover 3 years. Also, new rules mandate the NHTSA measurements hold steady or show improvement in a 3-year period. A waiver was issued by US DOT for 2024, allowing the measures to not be identical between the two programs. In response, NMDOT decided to use this to reevaluate how the performance measures are set. Usually, 5-year moving averages are used to set the safety measures for that assigned year. The 5-year moving averages are limited to following crash trends, which have been increasing over the last several years, which is unacceptable to NMDOT. NMDOT's HSIP and HSP will both hold steady or show declining numbers, which accurately demonstrates NMDOT's commitment to improving safety outcomes. The New Mexico Department of Transportation Multimodal Planning and Programs Bureau and the Traffic Safety Division are responsible for coordinating the settings of PM1 targets. So first is the number of state fatalities. This is in the state of New Mexico. It shows, so the black line is the total fatalities, the red line is the 5-year moving average, and now we have the blue mark on there for the 5-year moving the target. And so for a number of state fatalities, the target is set at 445 fatalities. The number of state serious injuries, the target is set at 1,010 serious injuries. For the fatality rate, the target is set at 1.644. For a serious injury rate, it is set at 3.8. And then for non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, the target is set at 200. The purpose of the performance standards from the state of New Mexico in accordance with federal regulations is to monitor crashes of motorized vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians, paying attention to fatalities and serious injuries. The safety performance measure mandate by Congress has increased awareness and dialogue about safety issues around the country. The measures have motivated jurisdictions to seek solutions to underlying factors of crashes. The trend lines are indicators of very complex factors that cause crashes. These factors are explored further in the 2022 NMDOT Annual Report, which is available on their website. The Mesilla Valley MPO Annual Safety Report is another document that developed from the safety performance measure requirement. MPO staff will release the next safety report this week. The state and Mesilla Valley MPO are committed to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. I will now stand for comments and questions.
Okay, I guess the projected numbers are higher than the target, so how do you reconcile those differences?
Sorry, say that one more time.
The projected numbers are higher than the target numbers that are being recommended.
Yes.
So, and these are state numbers, right? You're just presenting what the state has adopted or will be adopting.
That is correct.
So how do you reconcile between the higher actual or projected versus the targets? Wishful thinking?
I will relay that question to Mr. Ray.
Mr. Chair, this does to some extent represent an aspirational target set by NMDOT, which I think is, given a lot of the complaints that, justified complaints, I think, that have been made about sort of the very idea of the targets from sort of the philosophical underpinnings from criticisms made from the very beginning. I think this does show that NMDOT is listening to those criticisms and is now starting to set aspirational targets rather than just pegging the target to the moving average. So in that sense, I think it is a deliberate attempt by NMDOT to put some downward force to try to give this a little bit more teeth and induce hopefully changes that will have a positive impact on moving that number downward. I do have to admit, though, that when we received the targets, NMDOT did not share their methodology for the development of the targets with us. Again, the conversation that we had at the target-setting meeting in May, this was not what was discussed. So I'm afraid I have to say that what you see tonight is what we have. We don't know the methodology, we don't understand it, we were not given that, and so we're not able to present on it.
So we could hope that we see programs from NMDOT that would promote safety and increase the possibility of reaching these targets.
One would certainly hope so, Mr. Chair.
Any of the committee members have comments?
Jim Wilcox for the record. Kind of reminds me of a concept of a plan. What does it mean when we say something is aspirational?
It means that we aspire to get there. We hope that we will be able to do it.
Yeah, I heard the word hope also. Hope and aspiration obviously don't mean implementation. So I'm not sure that those are placeholders that are adequate. And I personally wouldn't use those as any sort of reference point. So one of the concerns I have is that when we're talking about safety, and I realize the city's not here, but when we're talking about safety, we're dealing with the fact after 4 years that I've been in the city, there's only been a bicycle pedestrian coordinator for 1 year. And I was just looking at the job description for that position, and it has a lot to do with safety, giving advice about how to make things more safe. So just as my opinion in this, I think that that's a real deficit, and it's one that needs to be addressed. I was looking at the pay rate for this, and they said earlier that they weren't getting applications, and the salaries, 58,000 starting, and I don't know if that's adequate or not, but I don't know if they raised it. So just for the record, I think that we've been dilatory in meeting the requirements that would make things more safe, and I don't think that aspirational or hope have any place in meeting goals.
So I guess the other comment that I'd make in this area goes to the University Avenue Multimodal Project. This committee has recommended that they use 11-foot lanes throughout the entire project. Johns Hopkins had a study that says narrower lanes are safer, and yet the final design still has 12-foot lanes for part of the project. So that makes me question the aspirational of New Mexico Department of Transportation and makes me think that we could be doing better. Any other comments? Thank you for that. So we'll move on to performance measures.
Mr. Chair, we have to have a vote.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I'll hear a motion to recommend approval of the safety targets 1 to the policy board.
Chair, I'll make a motion to approve action item 5.1.
Andrew Guerra, second.
So we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of these safety targets to the policy board. All in favor, aye? Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed?
The measure passes. Now we're on to 5.2.
Yes. This will be presented by Mr. Dominic Loy.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Facilities Committee. So NMDOT at this time has decided that during the mid-period, they will be updating Performance Measures 3, which are the system performance and reliability measures. The last time these were adopted was in 2023. And as I said, this is a mid-period progress and target adjustment to the to this performance measure. So there are three basically that we adopt here because we are not a TMA. So the three we adopt are the system performance, its percentage of interstate reliable person miles, percentage of non-interstate reliable person miles, and the truck travel time reliability index. So these are the rest of the measures, and these are the ones we do not adopt because we are in compliance as a small MPO. DOT determined the travel times on our interstate and non-interstate are very reliable, as well as the freight movement as measured by the index is highly reliable. So this is for 2023. These are on the interstate. This is a percentage. As you can see, the target was 95.1%. They hit 97.2% during that, although there were a couple of months where they missed that in September, October, and November. So because of that, they are looking to adjust down. The previous one was 95.1%. They're looking to adjust down to 90%. And this is because of a couple of big interstate projects that are coming up. The one that they are most concerned about is on I-25 in Albuquerque between Comanche Road and Montgomery Boulevard, which includes a lot of freeway interchange and frontage road improvements. So that will slow down the reliability. As well as there are, just across the state, there are projects going on almost all the interstates. So on the non-interstate reliable person miles, the target was 94.1%, they hit 95.5%. But as you can see, as the year went on, they did get lower and lower in their percentage rate of being able to hit that target. So there was a steep decline in the reliability on the non-interstate roads. Again, because of this, they are going to go ahead and adjust the target to 90% from 94.1%. The truck travel reliability index. So this one, you want to be closer to 1 on this one than you do higher numbers. As you can see, 1 month in October of 23, it was very much outside of what the target was, which is 1.30. The year-to-date was 1.19. And because of the big project coming up again on I-25, they are looking to move that up to 1.40 because of the issues that will be going through that area. It will slow down the entire state's reliability. And as I said before, it was at 1.30 and they're looking to move to 1.40. As I said before, we did, the Mississippi Valley MPO did adopt them in January of 2023. MPO staff is requesting the BPAC recommend the updated performance measures 3 to the policy board. The policy board will be taking action on this at their December 11th meeting. I will now stand for any comments or questions.
Okay, thank you. Again, we're looking at statewide numbers. So when the flyover was closed over here at the interchange, we don't know if that adversely affected the overall numbers. It sounds like it's the Albuquerque situation where they have much higher traffic levels. When they essentially close that road, that's what affects the state numbers. Is that maybe accurate?
So I think the flyover probably did have a little bit to do with it. As you can see, the months that were on there that were down were also months that the interchange was closed there. So that may have had at least a little bit, but Albuquerque does, because of how big it is, it has more gravitational pull on the reliability.
Okay, any committee members have questions?
Jim Wilcox for the record. What are some of the factors that cause lowering of reliability?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Wilcox. So some of the factors are just basically slowdowns, people not being able to move through an area basically at the speed limit, things like that. So construction will slow it down, crashes, just different things like that. A roadway that's not designed for the amount of traffic it's getting, things like that will slow down the reliability.
So construction for improvement could actually look like a lowering of reliability, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Wilcox, yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? So I'll hear a motion to recommend performance measures 3 to the policy board.
Albert Casillas, for the record, I'll make a motion to approve action item 5.2.
Mr. Chair, Jim Wilcox for the record, I second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second to recommend these performance measures to the policy board. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And that passes. So we're under our discussion items. For item 6.1, we have a presentation from Velo Cruces.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Donald Wilson will be presenting this item.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Donald Wilson. I'm the current president of Velo
Can you bring the
Cruces.
mic up a little bit?
Sure, is that any better?
I think, yeah.
Okay. And I guess somebody will operate the slides for me, or do I do it from here? Okay, great, terrific. Thank you. Thank you for giving me some time tonight to talk about the results of some work that Velo Cruces has been doing with the local bicycle community to try and identify improvements for the BPAC and the MPO for consideration in future planning efforts. The results that I'm presenting to you tonight come from two sources. The first is a survey of cyclists that we conducted in September of 2023. We had 122 participants. We can provide statistics if you'd like those as to the demographics of that group, though it did tend to the most part to be middle-aged white males were the particular people that completed that survey. We are planning to do that survey every 2 years, and we are strategically designing the survey the next time we do it to try to reach a wider demographic of people that actually ride cycles in our communities. The next group that we used to pull this together was a face-to-face meeting we held. Several months ago, there was an MPO meeting in which the group had a bunch of maps around the room and was asking for feedback on design elements that should be considered going forward. And so we took one of those maps and had a meeting. I think there were 18 people there, and sat down and addressed the issues that I'm going to present to you today. So the first task we came up with for this group of cyclists was to identify at least 3 east-west routes that are preferred by the cycling community. You'll see here we identified more than 3 to give the planners some feedback. Hadley would be is preferred to be excellent, except there's no connection between Church and Armijo. Ride down Hadley, and then what do you do when you get to Church? How do you continue to the other side? Otherwise, Hadley's a great cycling route. Las Cruces Avenue is very acceptable, except the speed bumps that extend the full width of the roadway are hazardous for cyclists. Foster would be good if it eventually can connect this at the west end of Melendres and then at the east end to Trevice, find a way to get through that whole apartment complex that would be navigable for bicycles. That'd be a very nice east-west connector. Angler is currently a road that in some places doesn't exist. So this would be, if we get out ahead of this and put some foresight and planning into it, it would be an excellent facility for connecting that part of the valley to the East Mesa. University, while it's not ideal because of heavy car traffic, it is essential that this be a connector because it's the only way for somebody on a bicycle to get to those businesses and residential areas that are on the East Mesa. One of the participants in our face-to-face meeting is a young woman, and her mother lives up there. And so the only way she can go visit her mother is up University, which, as all of you know right now, is not an ideal cycling facility. Loman, again, while unideal because of heavy car traffic, it's the only way to get to that part of the city if you have to go there for business or visit people. One idea that came up from the group that we would like to see, given good consideration, is if there's a way to extend that multi-use trail from I-25 near the Ruby Tuesday across North Tell Shore. There's an old paved road that used to be an entrance to the Sitel parking lot. That could be an extension, and then just ride up along the bottom of the Corps of Engineers levee, take that bike, create a multi-use path, run it under Roadrunner Parkway, all the way up to Sonoma Ranch Boulevard. That would just be an excellent way of creating a way for people to get around our community on cycles or scooters or walking, all those methods that people use other than cars. We then looked to identify 3 north-south routes that are preferred by the cycling community. And one observation we all made is there are more, the north-south routes that exist now tend to be pretty robust. It's really the east-west ones that have gone unaddressed in the planning process. But Elks, if there's a connector to the Trevice Trail and a connection to the multi-use path, connection to the Trevice Trail that would go under Highway 70 in Maine, just like the trail goes under University, that would be exceptional. Make that a very usable facility. Stern, if the shoulder was widened and smoothed out, that would be a nice north-south route for cyclists. Mesquite, once you figure out what to do kind of at that south end where it runs into some one-way streets and streets that just stop. Sonoma Ranch, if the multi-use pathway is fixed where it crosses intersections. Unfortunately, though it's a very attractive facility, it's not safe for cyclists because you're riding along and then all of a sudden there's this huge dip that drops you down. So the idea of maybe creating those pedestrian tables so that the multi-use pathway is level and then the cars would go over some kind of a raised area in the road. El Paseo with some forethought and lower speeds. Just a little aside here, I grew up here in Las Cruces. I went to Las Cruces High School. I rode my bicycle to school every day. I rode up and down El Paseo every day. It's the only way to get certain places, right? But there's a lot of people on that road, and it's not a road that people can feel very comfortable on, especially with the speeds that people ride on El Paseo. Espina with some widening, not sure how you do it between Loman and Las Cruces. Espina would be an exceptional north-south bicycle facility. The next thing we addressed with the in-person group, and also I want to just reiterate that these comments also come from that survey of 122 different people. So all of these things were talked about in that one meeting. We pulled the information from both sets of data. But the biggest concern we have regarding the facilities in our community is connectivity. There are some very nice sections of roadway that are very accommodating for non-vehicle users, but then they just disappear. They just end. It's befuddling to people that are trying to use them. Sometimes you can't get to them because there's no way to get to them safely. So for instance, connecting the north end of the outfall channel across North Tell Shore, you know, that multi-use pathway I just talked about, extending that, maybe that side tell parking lot, getting that all the way to the levee, bringing it around, taking it up through that arroyo underneath Roadrunner. That would be a really nice facility that would be used by many people that need to get around our community in ways that are not vehicles, road vehicles, cars or trucks. The Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad crossing, an outfall channel path connecting. Yeah, you know, I don't know what to say about that. You're riding along, having a great day, and then you say, stop, you cannot proceed behind here. But I can see the trail. It's 20 feet over there. I can't cross over there and get on the trail. And it doesn't tell you what to do instead. It just says you may not proceed. So people, you know, pick up their bikes and walk across. You know, come on. The outfall channel path crossing at Valley, where it comes down one side of the outfall channel, and then you cross over Valley and then go to the other side of the outfall channel. Cars do not stop on Valley. So maybe the idea of adding a hawk there, to make it connect. The multi-use trail that crosses at North Main at the Las Cruces lateral south of Madrid. That's a scary connection. It's, again, a very nice facility. You're coming up from kind of the north and you're tooling along right there next to that drainage, that nice concrete drainage canal, and then you get to Main Street. And I took my 10-year-old nephews on a bike ride, got to there, and I was petrified trying to get across Main, you know, just to get to the bike path. Again, 20 feet away on the other side. It's right there, I can see it. I just had to figure out how to get there without being run down by the cars and trucks that are zipping along Main. Again, no signage, there's not even a crosswalk painted on the asphalt. There's no light you could hit, hawk light, nothing that could help you get across safely. Otherwise, a very nice facility. Some other problem areas that we'd like to see addressed over the next decade, connecting the Traverse Trail across Maine to Elks and connecting Elks to the multi-use pathway at Columbia. So again, maybe if there's some way to take that Traverse Trail underneath Maine like was done at University, that'd be wonderful. Of course, we've worked on that part of the road for years. 3 times we've torn up the asphalt. Nobody did this yet, so I don't think they're going to tear up the asphalt again to put a tunnel under there, but maybe someday. The space between bollards and the multi-use pathway. So this has become an issue lately because one of the bicycle community's stalwart people that has ridden a bike here all over this valley for decades is now using a tricycle, and she can't use the tricycle on the multi-use pathway because her tricycle is more than 36 inches wide. Remove the slip lanes on bicycle commuting routes. Those are dangerous. I used to commute from my home in downtown Las Cruces to my work, which was at the corner of Roadrunner and Northrise Drive. And I had to go up North Tell Shore right there by Del Rey Boulevard. And a few years ago, somebody put in a slip lane from Del Rey coming south onto North Tell Shore. So then as a commuter, a bike commuter, I could no longer go straight through that intersection in the right-hand lane. I had to be in the left lane, which is the only lane for straight traffic going through. So I've got cars behind me. And then as soon as I get out of that chute, I've got cars zipping from Del Rey right onto North Tell Shore. So in order to get out of the way of cars behind me, I've got to figure out how to insert myself in the cars that are coming full speed through that slip lane. That should never have been allowed to be designed on a road which connects, that road connects bicycle areas. Again, it doesn't fully connect them. You've got a bike path here and a bike path here, And then I guess the bicycles are just supposed to maybe get on a city bus to go from here to here? I don't know. I don't know what the plan was. Wyatt, Idaho, Melendres, Main Connector, that would be an excellent place. Do a little bit of design work with some of the property owners there, create some easements, connect Wyatt. You could tie right into that EBID. There's a ride which is done by many people in the community that have mountain bikes that connect with that ditch there right behind the that housing development that lets them go pretty far south. Multi-use pathway connecting Idaho from Maine to University along the EBID right away. That would be very nice. Connecting Brown Road to Burn Lake Multi-Use Trail. That'd be super. Right now, some people just kind of take their bike or walk through there. I'm sure the property owners around there are not real pleased with that. Connecting the Mesilla Drain Multi-Use Trail through Burn Lake and the Box Culvert to Lakeside Drive. Ride with a group of people, and every Sunday we go through there. But it's not user-friendly to do that. More connectivity issues, route design and signage for tourists and new residents. We believe that the focus should be on how to get to schools by bike, how to get to NMSU from the plaza by bike, et cetera. There should be thought given, there's design, intentional design to how to move around this community. There should be designs for how to get to a grocery store. And that there should be signage so that people that move into our community, we have every fall, I don't know how many new students come to NMSU, probably 4,000 people that weren't here the previous year. And we have there's no signage, there's not even a way right now for them to easily get downtown on a bicycle or a scooter or some other means of transportation other than a car. Replace the sharrows with bike may use full lane signage. Sharrows, well, sharrows I don't know what they do. They get covered up by disintegrating car tires. You can't see them after a while. And the signs that say bike, share the road, the car drivers think that means the bicyclist needs to share the road with the cars. So our request is use the signage that says bike may use full lane because that's what is intended. Separate facilities, of course, are the preference. Buffered bike lanes would be next. We're thrilled about the idea of roundabouts. They really are the preferred method for intersection control. That allows somebody on a bicycle to move through without not having to stop if it's clear to go into the intersection. For bicyclists, stopping and starting requires a lot of energy. For a car, you just lift your foot and put down, like that, just like that. But for bicyclists, it requires a lot more. Some priorities that we see in order to set the groundwork to start solving some of these issues. We've asked the city, county, and town of Mesilla to join the Vision Zero network and set a Vision Zero target of 0 road user deaths by 2035. We have not received traction on those things yet from the elected officials. We are aware that within the city, there are many departments that are moving forward with the idea of the Vision Zero. They're employing safe systems approaches to design, but we believe that it all starts with leadership at the top setting the vision of no road user deaths in our county by 2035. Some kind of intentional safe routes to school design. So again, it should be easy for somebody to get from wherever they live to the school they go to. We should think all that through. We should design those routes. We should put signage up. We should make sure that the school administrators know what those routes are and that anybody that's new to our community can find out that information. Equity for accommodating tricycles and adaptive cycles on buses. That's going to be a planning issue because City invested a lot of money in the bike racks that are on the buses, and they're wonderful, but that leaves a part of our community out of access to public transportation because if they have a tricycle or adaptive cycle, it won't go on those racks. Some kind of education campaign for motorists, pedestrians, and cyclists. All three groups need to be educated on what their rights are and what their responsibilities are and how to share the public roadways. We think it'd be great to have a social media app that can be used to identify problem areas. We do know the city has that Ask Las Cruces app. Many of us use that, but it's not real user-friendly. So maybe the city or county can look at redesigning that. And I know there are issues where I've turned in a lot of things on the multi-use pathway, and they seem to take forever because somebody has to figure out, well, is that the city or is that the county? Whose problem really is it to fix? From the user's standpoint, it should be seamless. Report it, and then the correct municipality or jurisdiction should take care of it. We'd like to see automated speed cameras. Those have been effective in a lot of areas of the country at changing behavior of drivers. And the other side of it is those automated speed cameras generate revenue. The revenue can be used to invest in some facilities upgrades that can make the entire system safer for people. Final thing on this page is talk about secure bike parking at existing businesses, not just new businesses. Velo Cruces is currently conducting a petition drive to get people to sign a petition to ask the city to include requirements for bike parking at existing businesses as part of their Realize Las Cruces upgrade to the building code. For many years, it's just been new businesses, and the way new businesses was defined, that they're just as, you cannot go to businesses around this community and park a bike. You just can't. I mean, even the big grocery stores, which is crazy that you can't go to a grocery store and park your bike securely. That should have been solved years ago. Okay, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. A lot of these recommendations go directly to the MTP update, so hopefully staff will take note of this. I got another question for staff, I guess. You have the presentation here. In the minutes, we often see, and this person gave their presentation. I wonder if it wouldn't be appropriate to ask that this be transcribed fully because it has the details that otherwise will not appear in the minutes.
We will ask for the transcription of this presentation to be verbatim.
Anybody else?
Jim Wilcox for the record. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for all that logistics to get this together. One of the things that concerns me is that when we ask a lot of people to participate and give their opinion and their ideas, do we follow up on that? At least get back to them, even if it's to say, we couldn't do that, and here's why. And I'm hoping that Velo Cruces will continue to keep track of this and it doesn't fade into some thing that happened many, many months ago and years ago, and we don't know what the outcome was. As far as the slip lanes, I think that is a really dangerous situation. A lot of motorists don't think about it. You know, when you're driving a car, you don't really think about how it is to be a pedestrian trying to walk through a slip lane. And that's that quick right turn lane that avoids the light. So if you go to the right, you're gonna look to the left to see if the cars are coming. You're not gonna look to the right to see if there's a person crossing the crosswalk. There is no stop sign. I mean, there's no stoplight for somebody who's in the slip lane as a pedestrian. So they just get used to it. And if you see the people coming off the freeway up on Lohman taking a right turn, they don't even stop. They just, because they're in a hurry, they're trying to get through. And so I've tried to walk across there. It's really dangerous. You practically have to set a bomb off before people notice you're there. So I'm glad you brought that up. And one of the things that I know that Velo Cruces has done is has Instagram presence where they've identified these concerns. And I would recommend that people go to Velo Cruces webpage, click on the Instagram. You'll see brief 1-minute videos of an analysis of these dangerous locations and how they could be corrected. And also, you can put in your own ideas. Hey, what would you do as a traffic engineer to fix this? Also, I want to expand a little bit on what you said about directional wayfinding. When we get these bike routes figured out, what can be done is you can put to the right 12 minutes by bike to the university. And then people who come to town that have just moved here, they can learn real quickly how to get around on a bike. I was here a year before I could figure out most of the ways to get around fairly quickly without endangering my life, which I still do, but not as much. And then the last thing that I'm really concerned about is that equity. And when we talk about equity, we talk about people. There's people who can't afford a car. When you count the cost of transportation and housing, it's 45% of people who are in a low-income category. That's 45% of their budget. And if their car breaks down, they can't get to work. And so the bicycle is a really optimal way to do a number of things. It gets you to that job. Now, I admit in summer it's 105 degrees. You're not going to ride, maybe. Take the bus if you can to get a ride. But 9 months of the year, it's pretty good around here to ride a bike. That's one of the reasons why I moved here. And the other thing is, a lot of these people are on public health programs. We're paying for their health care. And frankly, we just got a new report about Americans' obesity. I think we're up to 3/4 are overweight or obese now. The average person is gaining by 100 calories a day. And after a course of 10 years, that adds up to roughly 100 pounds. And then people are way behind, and it's like, what can I do? Then they have health problems. So if we have more access to bicycles, then we end up helping our people who are at risk for developing these problems. Because 100 calories a day is roughly 3 miles of biking a day or 1 mile of walking. So when you integrate your transportation with with your health, then you reduce your healthcare costs. And the other thing is that for short distances, it's not a good idea to start up your car. The car is wears the most, uses the most gasoline for those trips that are 1 or 2 miles, because the car has to heat up. It's not efficient. The pollution is going into the catalytic converter if it actually is working, and most people, they don't keep up on that. So there's just so many benefits by implementing these things. And I want to make sure that it's not just seen as benefits for cyclists, that it's benefits for people, it's benefits for our community, and it helps reduce the costs for everybody. And I think that we have kind of a chicken and egg sort of a problem. I've seen this before where somebody says, well, why should we put all this infrastructure in there? We never see any bicycles. Well, it's because the infrastructure is not there, so people don't want to ride because it's dangerous. And so when you put the infrastructure there, it's like that Field of Dreams, you know, if you build it, they will come. And many businesses now, when they're looking to relocate or to establish a business in a city, they say, well, how is the transportation system? Because a lot of the younger people now, and I guess call them 30 years old would be young in my book, they're executives, you know, they're professionals. They want to be able to not have to have 2 cars. They can save so much money, and they can live in a much better fashion if they don't have 2 cars, and they can just use a bicycle or 2 bicycles to get those short distances. And the other thing that you mentioned about the fact that there's no secure bike parking, it's very rare. And it just totally shocks me that you run the risk. And if you're a low-income person and you don't have a car, you lose your bike because somebody steals it. Now you're really in trouble, and then you can't get to work, and your boss is like, what's going on? How come you're late to work? Why don't you show up? I can't have you here. I need somebody reliable, and you're out of your job. And that's because we are not moving fast enough on these options that should be priorities, because we're not treating the people who walk and bike as equal to the people who drive. And so that I really appreciate that you brought these forward, and I hope you'll continue to monitor, you know, follow up on what's happening, who is it given to, not just given to somebody. We never hear about it again. So thank you very much.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could just respond briefly to Mr. Wilcox's comments. That is a slide, that is something we really need to add to this slide, which is the issue of equity. So this is not a statistic I know the source of, but But in reviewing the literature, we have seen that communities need to recognize that upwards of 30% of the people in a community cannot drive a vehicle for whatever reason. It might be because they're underage. It might be because they have a health issue which doesn't allow them to get a vehicle license. It might be because they can't afford one. But if you think of that, 30% is a huge number. In Las Cruces, that would be 30,000 people that have to figure out how to get around this community without the benefit of a car. And we need to offer them a safe way to move around the community. We need to educate them on the safest routes to move around the community so they can go to our local businesses. If you have no car, you can't go down to the grocery store. What are you going to do? You're going to order online and they're going to deliver it to your door. That doesn't support local businesses. But if somebody has to make a choice between, taking the hazardous road on a bicycle or walking on a hazardous route to go to a local store to support the local store rather than shopping online with Amazon, that's the choice you're going to make. We can make it easier for people to be connected to our community. The same research that Mr. Wilcox is referring to talks about the benefits to a community of getting people outdoors in the community. People that ride bikes or walk, they know their neighbors. They know what new businesses are moving in. They know what businesses are next to each other. People driving in cars, they can go months without recognizing there's a new restaurant because they're zipping along the road at 40 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. So there are many benefits to the community of adopting the proposals we're recommending, and those benefits are not limited to the people, like myself, middle-aged white males that ride bicycles. There are a lot of other people that ride bicycles too.
Okay,
Thank you very much,
very much. We've got a fairly big agenda, so we'll move on to our next item. City of Las Cruces Public Works Active Transportation Plan presentation.
And Mr. Chair, we will have two presenters for this, Mr. Kyle Rind from the City of Las Cruces Public Works and Mr. Sugu Lee.
Arrows? This is almost at the right height. I'm not quite as tall as the previous gentleman, but I am pretty tall. Thank you. My name is Kyle Arndt. I'm the Engineering and Surveying Manager at Public Works Department for the City of Las Cruces. Been there about 2 years now. Previously to that, I was at the city of Asheville in North Carolina. And previous to that, I was about 20 years up in Fort Collins, Colorado. This is an informational update on some of the projects that our Public Works Department is working on. Just wanted to give you kind of a breakdown. This is probably something we should be doing on an annual basis. This first slide is just kind of a map of the area. What you see highlighted in the colors here are different projects that are currently in different stages of either construction or design or planning. The blue ones are active projects that are under construction or imminently under construction. The green ones are projects that are coming up next. They either are still working through design issues or they haven't been fully funded. And then you've got purple and red are projects that are several years out. The first project I wanted to illustrate is Cortez Drive up on the East Mesa. This is a minor collector. It has already been put out to bid. Construction is imminent on that. It'll be starting possibly in December, but more likely in January. It's about a mile-long road connecting Cortez from Porter to Dunn. It will provide new buffered bike lane facilities along with a 6-foot sidewalk on the one side and an 8-foot trail on the other. Currently, this road is just basically a 2-lane road with no facilities whatsoever. So this will add about 2 miles of bike lanes and 2 miles of sidewalks to our network. The Cortez Drive project, as I mentioned, connects Dunn Drive to Porter. It also provides a vital connection for some of the neighborhood up there to get access to the East Mesa Rec Center and Park, the Sage Cafe Community Center, and the East Mesa Memorial Pool Park. Cortez Drive was not identified on the city's ATP plan. That's basically because the ATP plan did not study that area on the upper East Mesa, but we believe it's a vital facility and should be considered an ATP type project. Next project I'm going to illustrate is Madrid Avenue Extension. This is the section of Madrid Avenue from Evelyn, where we just finished the work between Evelyn and Solano. This project continues the work from Evelyn up to Travis and concludes improvements at the Travis and Madrid intersection. Currently, this facility is just a 2-lane road with no bike lane facilities or sidewalks. As it's proposed, there'll be new buffered bike lanes, parkways, medians, and 8-foot wide sidewalks. We were really fortunate that this section goes through the Villa Morta Dam property, which is owned by the city of Las Cruces, providing us the opportunity to provide a robust set of infrastructure where most places were pretty limited by right-of-way. This facility also includes a couple intersections. One of the ATP inclusions on this project is the use of green stripe, which we haven't seen much of in the city of Las Cruces yet. Again, the buffered bike lanes and the sidewalks. And at the intersection of Travis, you'll see that this intersection can be expanded upon quite a bit. It's going to include an exit route for the bike lane through movements off of the main roadway, being it's an uncontrolled intersection. We're also including with this project the use of an RRFB, rectangular reflector flashing beacon, and a new crosswalk across Travis. This will aid in getting access from the sections of Madrid heading back to the west to the Travis Trail. South Main, Idaho Bouts improvements. This project has been in the works for quite some time. It requires quite a bit of negotiation and approval with Burlington Northern, which is an ongoing item. We think we're pretty close, and we hope to get this project into construction sometime next year. This is a principal arterial. It connects South Main from Idaho all the way up to Bouts on the south end, and it includes rebuilding the intersections at Idaho Avenida de Mesilla and Bouts as well. That's a road diet. We're taking the 4-lane down to 3-lane. This provides an opportunity to add the buffered bike lanes and to expand upon the sidewalk there on the east side. On the west side, there will be no sidewalk because that's in Burlington Northern right-of-way, and they won't allow such facilities to exist. And again, this intersection at Bouts will include the use of some green stripe enhancements to aid the bicyclists across the busy intersection. It also includes new sidewalk facilities across Burlington Northern, both at the Bouts intersection and at the Avenida de Mesilla intersection. These are facilities that currently don't exist in any form. Another project that we're currently working on is Ethel Avenue at Huma Street. We've illustrated this one because it's on the safe route to school route. It's got 2 schools nearby. It improves 1,300 feet of Ethel Avenue as well as Huma Street. The new cross section includes reducing the drive lane widths to provide more opportunity for widening the sidewalk. It's going to have some extension bulb outs to aid in managing traffic calming as well as green infrastructure, and an increase to street lighting. This project hasn't been fully funded yet, but we're gearing up to have this ready for construction next summer. Evelyn Street is another project that's on our upcoming list. It hasn't been funded yet. Evelyn Street is currently on the ATP plan as a connector between Madrid Avenue down to Spruce through Kilmore. This first section of Evelyn Street will be the next project from Madrid just to Ash Avenue, 2,000 feet or less. It's also one of our transit routes, and it has a couple nearby schools. The plan concept for this project is to take the existing pavement width, potentially eliminate parking on one side of the road to provide some additional opportunity for bike facility, as well as widen the sidewalks. Campos Street, this project is from Spruce to Loman. As it was previously proposed, it envisioned taking the existing center lane and reusing it for bicycle and pedestrian facilities as a cycle track. We're still working on the design of that. There's a number of complications with trying to integrate a cycle track in a busy urban corridor. But that's a project we're currently working on and hope to have ready to move into construction as it proceeds. And that project would extend the bicycle network by a little over 6,500 feet, and again includes street lighting. The Campos Street project also includes a portion of Hadley as well as Oregon Street up to Klein Park, with the idea of adding sidewalks and streetlights. The University Corridor Study, this is just a study at this time. This is to take a look at the University Corridor within the city limits, and really take a fresh look at it and look at any opportunities of how this could be re-envisioned into something different. That means all ideas are on the table. And that study is, it's got a pretty extensive public engagement process. It's got a process to collect a lot of data, safety data, traffic data, proposed use data, and really take a good, hard, thorough look at what, how this might change and how it might serve our citizens better. That's it for our presentation.
Okay, thank you. So that was very informative. I guess a couple of questions or comments at least. A couple of the projects, I saw the roadway cross sections, you're using 11-foot travel lanes. So thank you. I guess is my response to that. At the Madrid project where it would connect up to Treviso.
Correct.
Last time I was up there intending to cross over to the multi-use trail, there aren't any curb cuts there really. So I'd recommend that you look at making sure that you have a good way for the people that would want to avoid being in the roadway on Madrid or on Treviso, that they have access up to the multi-use trail on the east side of the road.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry. If you can see my mouse, there's going to be a new curb cut right here at the end of that crosswalk to allow for safe access onto the Madrid,
okay.
the Trees Trail, if that's what you meant.
And for the main street project, the Idaho to Bouts length, the part that concerns me isn't the intersection itself, but leading up to it. There's bicycle facilities on Melendres. So when you get to Melendres to Main Street, then you're in no man's land until you get through the intersection and get into the new construction. So I would.
You're right. There's a pitch point right there where the canal goes underground, and the facilities don't exist whatsoever on that section of South Main. Melendres doesn't technically have bike facilities, but it's a nice wider road and it can accommodate bike facilities. It's also not on the ATP plan. We've asked the ATP folks to look at possibly using Melendres more extensively as a proposed bicycle route, given that it's the speeds you're on are much lower and it provides a vital connection again to South Main as you mentioned, but on all the way up to Picacho across Amador.
Right, it is a roadway that personally I have to use if I'm going to Walgreens or to even Albertson sometimes, coming down Melendres, and then you battle your way through to Idaho, and then you can make it through there. So any improvements that could be handled as part of this project would be good. Part of the previous presentation talked about the Wyatt Drive intersection, connection from Wyatt through Main Street into that area. So that's all in that same area. I recognize that this project couldn't address that, but having that in mind, it's something to look at in the future. And the city is expected to receive their Safe Streets for All grant, which will update the active transportation plan. And having participated in the previous active transportation plan, that area just wasn't looked at. And it was just an oversight. I mean, there are lots of areas like the East Mesa one that you're talking about. There's just some areas that we didn't really look at. And hopefully we can address those more thoroughly with this active transportation plan update.
Yeah, I agree. There is an opportunity there, and I think we're looking forward to possibly another phase that might make better use of that area in specific, as well as a couple
Right,
others.
because right now you've got Wyatt comes in as a bicycle facility, and then it just dead ends. And
Right.
so that's the kind of facility we want to avoid, where we can actually connect through. It would make sense that Wyatt connects through to Melendres somehow.
Yeah,
And
well,
that's
you're
just not
definitely,
possible now without going wrong way against traffic on the sidewalk, pretty much.
yeah, you're right about that, that it takes a collection of pieces to put together a full pie, and it takes time and effort to get through that until you get a fully connected network. And then when you start to get a fully connected network, you see dramatic increases in its usage. People can actually get from point A to point C and
Right.
around B if they have to.
Yeah, well, I thank you for this presentation. There are many times in the past, over many years that I've been involved with this, the city will do a project and then we go and look, why didn't you consider this? So and the city has been much better in the public input phases of project design. So thank you for that also. Any committee members?
Jim Wilcox for the record. Thank you for that presentation. Do you feel that you have adequate staffing with people knowledgeable about bicycle pedestrian design currently?
We have a heavy workload. We have the right people. We have the right skill sets.
Okay, good. On the Madrid and Cortez, now having a center turn lane is useful when there's a lot of people needing to make a left turn. But there is no center turn lane on those designs, is that correct?
On Madrid,
On Madrid and Cortez, I saw you had one where there was a cutout to take a left. The reason I bring this up is that when you don't have a center turn lane, people stop to turn, they stop all the traffic to take a left. And then one of the things that can happen is they get over to the left side and people are behind them and they want to get past them, so they go into the bike lane.
that's right.
And
yeah.
so, but if there's not much need to take a left turn, it's kind of superfluous to put in a center turn lane. Are you feeling comfortable that there's not enough need for a left turn, that a center turn lane's not warranted?
On Cortez Drive, all of the side roads are local roads with pretty light traffic.
Okay.
And Cortez doesn't have a lot of traffic itself.
Okay,
There's no need for left turn lanes on Cortez.
center turn lane, you mean? Yeah, okay, or
On
left turn lanes.
Madrid, the bulk of the Madrid project goes through the Villa Morta Dam where there's no access to anything anyway.
Okay,
So there's no need for any left turn lanes
okay.
or center turn lanes.
I know it's hard to collaborate sometimes, but I was really surprised to see there's sort of a path on the south side of the university that's university right of way, and the path is kind of broken up and it's kind of been neglected. if you can work out a collaboration with them to improve that somehow, I think it's a great opportunity for a two-way bike access there going up and down over by the, up to the convention center. It seems like it's underutilized, but you have to get the collaboration with the university. And then the last thing is, as you probably know, but just in case, when you put a bike lane, a bike lane on the left side of parking, then there's a thing called being doored, and that's where somebody opens their door and the bicyclist doesn't notice, and they hit the door. And what happens typically is it throws them out into the traffic. And I'm not an expert in how to mitigate that other than moving it to the other side, which a lot of municipalities just won't do. But think when you're doing your design, thinking about that, I've seen situations where they actually have a little sign for the people parking their car. It says, "Look for bikes," So just a little reminder that watch out, because people are just not thinking about it.
You're right.
Thank you for the presentation. That was great.
Okay, thank you. We're on to Mesilla Valley MPO Annual Safety.
Mr. Chair, we have the second part
Oh,
of that
okay.
agenda item, second speaker.
Oh, great.
This will be Mr. Suguli, Mr. Chair.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of BPAC. My name is Sue Lee. I'm a traffic management administrator of the city of Las Cruces. Tonight, we would like to share our draft artery and collector speed management policy. Currently, we don't have the policy to address any speeding issue on our trail or collector. The current code only address any speeding issue or any safety concern on the residential street. So we work with Lee Engineering to develop this draft policy. So we'd like to share what is our draft policy, and I would like to get the feedback. So I'm going to yield the floor to the Mr. Willie Lohman for the presentation.
Thank you, Sue. Willie Roman with Lee Engineering, for the record. Chairman, members of the committee, I'd like to make this presentation to you tonight. How do I switch? Is it this? All right, thank you. And so Lee Engineering was retained by the city of Las Cruces to conduct this, or to produce this document for the city's behalf. We have done a handful of these documents for other agencies since then. And one of the unique natures of this particular document is that it covers collectors and arterials. Most agencies, most larger agencies have a document similar to this for local roads. But it's fairly unique for them, or fairly rare for them, to have a document that covers for speed management that will cover arterials and collectors. So this particular document for the city of Las Cruces is covering just those two classifications. They have a separate document that covers local roads. All right, so the document that they have that covers the local roads is covered in the municipal code 32-413. As I mentioned, it does cover how those kinds of roads, which are local roads, will be assessed and evaluated for traffic calming. But as I mentioned before, it specifically does not cover collectors and arterials. The goals of this policy are a little bit different also from the local road type of policy. This one is covering not just speeding, but it also covers vehicular safety and pedestrian and bicycle safety as well. So when the procedures from this document move forward, consideration should be taken into account for number 2 and number 3 as well. There is a difference between this particular document and the neighborhood traffic calming program, in that this document doesn't cover cut-through traffic. It specifically, the way that the neighborhood traffic calming program does cover cut-through traffic as well. will flow through the document. Essentially, this presentation is flowing through the document itself. And so the first step on this is how does this study or how does this process begin? This begins through either a determination of the city traffic engineer, a citizen request, or city council request. The warranting criteria are a little bit different, obviously quite a bit different, I'm sorry, from the local road criteria. This covers 30 mile an hour or greater roadways, traffic volumes no less than 3,000 ADT, and then has a pre-qualification of 85th percentiles in excess of 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. Now, that's a little bit different from local roads where it's typically 5 miles an hour. There's a little more variation when it comes to roads that are used more for flow in this way and for getting thoroughfares and getting vehicles through the road. So that's why the speeds are a little bit higher in those cases. Location priority is based on essentially the higher volume streets, and streets with significant speeding issues get moved higher. The procedures in this from this document do follow a FIFO system, meaning first in, first out. So if you have a document come in as April in the year, it's going to be addressed typically first, then something that comes in from June. There are other alternative methods in ranking criteria. We've done documents that are based on rank, and that's how that is a different way to address it, but the city typically handles things as FIFO, so this document follows their typical procedures. For analysis and implementation, the design criteria is based on the AASHTO and the City of Las Cruces roadway design standards. There's also some other speed management measures and design considerations from AASHTO, the NMDOT State Access Management Manual, and other applicable guidance or standards. There is, in some cases, you'll see a little bit later on that NACTO is considered a document that they can reference, but not necessarily specified right here in this presentation. For data collection, the analysis, it's from the analysis and the stakeholders, and then the influence area is determined by the City of Las Cruces in terms of what area the speeding issue it needs to cover. It's a little different when you're dealing with arterials and collectors because it could be a larger area that needs to be considered. There's some geometric features sometimes that you have to consider, some of the roadway design elements, so that influence area can be adjusted based on that. And then the city is, as you well already know, finds public notice important. That's part of the reason that we're here today, to bring it forward to yet another meeting. This presentation has been provided to other meetings as well, in order to get a feedback and make sure that the document has as much input as possible before it moves forward. So public meeting, initial findings and are discussed, obviously, and then feedback is sought before they move forward. The selection and installation of the speed management measures is based first on the selection or selecting from the techniques and the devices specifically within the policy. The policy we'll go through them in a little bit, but the policy does define what those specific techniques and devices should be. This is somewhat of a live document, although it's being presented as a firm document. It does have the capability to add things as best practices come forward, and that they're able to make engineering judgment on things that are showing some promise for speed management purposes. It's based on the study results, engineering judgment, and best practices, which clearly makes sense. And installation and implementation is at the expense of the city, except in some cases where perhaps a development or business would cause the issue and they're aware of this particular business or development that's causing an issue. So that is by a case-by-case basis. Whether the city requires them to pay will be based specifically on the city determination at that time. It's also based on budget constraints, even though the speed management techniques that might be sought based on the study and the implementation procedures may be identified. There still needs to be, in a lot of cases, let's say that there's a roundabout that needs to be installed or that is recommended for installation, that could be a $2 million project. So it's not going to be easily implemented. So something like that would have to be put on the CIP and may take several years in order to be installed. On the project evaluation, we would like to see that whatever was invested into the city and into the roadway network and into the safety of the area actually did work. So a review within 3 months to a year is going to be included into the policy. Public notice it would be given if it wasn't successful, so that everybody knows, hey, look, this wasn't successful, and it can be removed by the traffic engineer if it was deemed unsuccessful. Roadway maintenance also may cause the removal. As a previous traffic engineer, we had that come into play, mostly when it came to speed humps. When you had a mill and overlay, you were going to take out the speed hump. So a lot of times we had to redo or reassess the situation, and there could be, in some situations, no longer a need for that to be reinstalled. But that impact would be assessed at that point. So in this portion of the document, there's a summary of what types of speed management measures could be considered. And we specify a handful of different categories. You can see them to the left, whether they're enforcement or education. Some of you are familiar with that when it comes to the 3 E's. There's also vertical deflection, horizontal deflection, and geometric modifications, and then other. There's different ways. This isn't a standard way necessarily of sorting through the different traffic measures, but we just found it easier to categorize them in this way. The one thing that becomes very obvious when you see this table is that any kind of vertical or horizontal deflection is not included in arterial speed management. You think of arterials like Loman, Sonoma, Roadrunner Parkway, you don't really want to add either vertical or horizontal deflection onto the road for the purposes or for the reasons that emergency vehicles can't afford any delay in reaching somebody that has a heart attack or a stroke. Those seconds matter. So that's something that you want to avoid. But it is included, as you can see, in a collector. Where collectors, although they're still thoroughfares, they're not necessarily at the same level of an arterial. So you can then consider them, which was why you see stars located there by the check marks, meaning that there are some restrictions for those collectors for particularly the vertical deflection. There's some major ones like roundabouts and road diets that you go through the list. There's quite a bit of them there that are familiar probably to this committee. And you can see that they're applicable to both type of categories. And then as you go down into the other category, there's different elements. A lot of them are I guess I would say psychological. Like the landscaping treatments, the gateway treatments, the medians, those things cause drivers to feel more constrained and have shown some promise to provide some level of speed management a benefit from that. So the rest of this is just a summary of each of those categories. What we did in the document itself, I won't go through each of them specifically, but each of these slides will summarize for you the different types of categories that are provided within this policy. This one in particular is the targeted police enforcement. What they're applicable for, it's just a summary of this table right here. So example, the targeted police enforcement should be shown then on this table as applicable to both collector and arterial. And then we also provided an efficacy based on our experience, based on best management practices, based on some documents, because we did do a literature review when we produced this document for the city. So based on our familiarity with these particular speed management, it at least gives the city a starting point. It is subjective. I wouldn't say it's objective. It's more subjective in terms of the efficacy, but it gives the city a starting point on whether they think that this can have some benefit and what type of benefit if it's applied. In this case, we added a little bit of definition, the efficacy for targeted police enforcement, clearly, nobody wants to get a ticket, and flashing lights slows everybody down. And so the efficacy is high, but once it's removed, it goes away. So that's a fairly obvious observation there. Education has, it's important to educate, and that's part of this policy as well, collaborating with those involved. It's clear, it's applicable to arterials and collectors, but unfortunately typically has a low efficacy. There's a sign program. This is a little misleading in that speed hump sign is not part of the sign program, but it's usually signs that are placed out in the general vicinity of a road that says slow down, don't speed, some kind of education that you're providing to the community, either through signs, some signs along the road for people to be able to become more aware that there is speeding known in the area and they need to slow down. Education, speed indicators and radar speed trailers are fairly good educators. A lot of speeders aren't aware that they're going that fast, and when they become aware of their speed, maybe they're going 40 on a 35, you got some speed indicators will have similar to police lights, and then also maybe they'll flash. Helps them become a little bit more aware. So there is pretty good results from that. Vertical deflection, such as like speed cushions, speed tables, raised crosswalks, things of that nature. Those are good for collectors. You can see that they do have, you can see that they're applicable to collectors, but there is the restriction that it's to the discretion of the traffic engineer. There are some of these in town, some on Hadley, there's some other roads where these have been applied. And so I imagine that Sue can speak to the benefit of what those have been able to produce in terms of speed management throughout the city so far. One thing to note on this document, speed humps are not included. They are different from speed tables. Speed tables have a flat top and usually about 10 feet on the top, which makes them essentially a table, where speed humps don't. They're just a rounded mound, and those are specifically not included in this document. Horizontal deflection, there's a few different ones I think that we'll talk about here, whether it be chokers or pinch points, neck downs, bulb outs, essentially either causing traffic to snake through on a corridor or to feel constricted. Again, it's that driver psychology. That's available on collectors. Chicanes, same thing. Those are staggered, causes that staggered effect. And then the larger, more costly is a roundabout, obviously. We have, I believe there's several roundabouts now coming around the city, especially in Sonoma. And there are some benefits to that. You can see that the efficacy is high if they're designed right. They need to be designed right in order for that benefit to be gained. And also single lane roundabouts are recommended above multi-lane. There's been some evidence to show that there could be a little bit different operating formalities between the two. So that was provided in that document. Traffic circles are a little bit more for lower volume roads. There's not nearly as much clarity in terms of how the operations of those intersections occur, but they do show some benefit for more residential type facilities. And then road diets, everyone's familiar with that in the city. At some point, probably been exposed, particularly on this committee. Reducing those travel lanes, taking a 6-lane to a 5-lane, or a 4-lane to a 3-lane. There's definitely been some benefits for that, and also benefits for bicycles and pedestrians when you're able to do something like that. The lane narrowing, center line, edge line, again, it's to that psychology that lanes become restricted when you don't have lane lines or shoulder lines. You can do a lot with that. You can restrict lane widths. You can do, there's a lot that you can do. That's a fairly inexpensive treatment that you can apply to roads and get some benefits from there. And then there are the ones that we talked about, the landscaping and the street trees. Again, the psychology, the gateway entrances that can be used, the median islands, crosswalks, a crosswalk refuge. All of those are all in that psychological benefit of pushing and constraining the traveling public in that way. And then there's also on the permanently reduced speed zones, and it's just lowering the speed in a specific area. It's either a special area or specific area. I think we've seen that NMDOT utilizes this on the safety corridor. That's kind of that idea where there's a safety corridor and you're reducing that speed limit in a special area. Signal timing can definitely help. We do. Lee Engineering has performed quite a bit. Of improvements in this respect for signal timing. There's not just progression like we see on Loman, where it forces vehicles to go a certain speed. I imagine that all of us here as citizens of Las Cruces have seen that speeder on Loman and Amador on the one-ways think that they're going to get ahead if they go 45 miles an hour on those one-ways, and then they catch a red and then they got to wait, right? So something like that we've done up in the north through Lee Engineering, not exactly like that as far as progression, but other things where we force arrest in red and get not necessarily trying to control traffic in the same way that multi-way stops are, for example, or I'm sorry, stop signs are not supposed to be used for speed management purposes. I want to stay away from that idea, but knowing that we can control speed timing and get vehicles to wait a little bit because we're trying to control traffic in a different way, and it ends up causing a benefit in some other cases. So high visibility crosswalks, also a good technique in order to help. There is a wide range of efficacy for high visibility crosswalks, and those are more like continentals, a ladder type or diagonals. I think the longitudinal bars are probably one of the less visible when we're coming through the road. It might even be confusing sometimes when those are used, but there's some other types that you can consider that are known to be high visibility. And then also high visibility signs such as fluorescent yellow-green, specifically going back to the idea that this document is trying to address pedestrian and bicycle safety as well. I know that when we do a study, and that's one of the things we think about, and not only in the high visibility signs in the color, but also maybe oversized might be considered in this case as that ends up being a benefit. Flashing beacons could also be considered, and in some cases the flashing could include kind of what you see like on an RFB, a little bit different type of a flash, not necessarily a circular ball, but other types of flashing types of apparatuses that can be used. And then special markings to warn the drivers. In some cases, you might have seen them around town where it says slow or it says 25, just different special markings that can be applied to the road. And with that, we'll take any feedback that you have so that we can incorporate it into this document moving forward. The purpose, obviously, in this document is in the end to take it to council and for it to become codified.
Okay, thank you. One of the modes that you didn't mention is transit. Are there any considerations for transit? Maybe as a bus goes through, priority access through intersections or something? Yeah, Chairman, I'll answer that question in this way. Signal timing probably leaves that open because that can be included in that priority, whether it's through equipment that's added to the signal system. And so that definitely could be something that could be added in there. Although I will say that that's a little bit different from standard speed management in terms of providing that priority to buses. It's not typically within the speed management for the goal of speed management, but I understand it in its benefits for the overall network. Do you want to speak to that, Sue?
So I want to just highlight that this policy is addressing the speed issue. So I want to just make sure you're aware we focus on the speed management, but I understand your concern. That is the different area. So if we can find any way we can incorporate, we may incorporate. But again, our main focus is speed management.
Right, I guess my general comment here is we should be managing the movement of people and not necessarily vehicles. And so since a bus could hold 30 people as opposed to 3 cars or whatever, I mean, one vehicle versus 30 vehicles could make it important to give priority to transit. But anyway, okay, the other part of your presentation, you talked about the 85th percentile and areas where you have speeders 10 miles an hour over the posted limit. Do you have mapping that shows that? And does that correspond to perhaps the high injury network? And how would those be handled?
From my past experience with the city, I don't believe they do have mapping for what the 85th percentile is through the city. I'll let Sue answer that part of the question, but you had a second part that said if we have it correlated with the more of the unsafe intersections. Is that what you're asking?
Right, the high injury network or wherever the occurrence of crashes has been documented.
So I do know that NMDOT has like a database, and you can obtain information that shows where these high injury places are, where more accidents occur, and it's like a heat map of sorts. I've been shown that before. I can't speak to it specifically. I've only been able to. But I know that it does exist, but I'll let Sue answer if he has one for the city.
So at this moment, we don't have any map yet to publish or open to the public. But we are in the process to generating the map to show any location over 10 mile at this moment. But at this moment, it's not available to the general public because we're still working on it.
Right, because that would go directly to the next thing on my list is the speed management and speed safety cameras. And so that would help identify locations where either permanent or temporary speed safety cameras might be used.
Correct. And then also we are working on it to how we can make a heat map a little bit different than what the NMDOT or the MPO they created every year, because that map is different than our purpose. That's the reason we have a different factor to apply to each accident happen on arterial or non-residential collector. So we're working on it again. But that's going to take a time because it is for the first time we try to create that map, like a heat map, very similar to what you used to see on the annual safety report.
Okay, and on the speed safety, US 70 seems to be a speeding corridor. Is there a possibility of having speed safety cameras on US 70?
Again, as you know, Mr. Chair, that's under the NMDOT jurisdiction. So we can work with the DOT, but at this moment I cannot speak for the NMDOT.
Okay, at the Transportation Safety Summit, the Secretary mentioned that it's easier for municipalities to implement speed safety cameras than it is for the state. So they might be able to, that might be something that you could work out with the NMDOT. And just while we're talking about speed management, we want to throw up equity. And so as part of a speed, I know this isn't directly at this, but if we come up with a speed safety camera program, I would hope that equity issues are addressed, and perhaps instead of just having a flat fee fine for any violations, that a public service component might be available for people to use instead of having to pay the fine. I've got some others, but I'm going to move us on. We're getting kind of behind. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, Jim Wilcox for the record. You said that road treatments like road diets and stuff can be requested by citizen request. What's the process for that?
So again, at this moment, we don't have any policy. This is a draft policy. So once we adapted this policy, then either citizen or council or traffic engineer are able to initiate. But at this moment, you can ask to us, then we will put in the list, and then whenever time comes, then we're going to do the study.
So are you saying there is no policy for how a citizen can request an examination of a street that they feel is dangerous?
At this moment, you are correct.
So that really shouldn't be on the list as an option.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, let me answer that question this way. If you're asking within the document, what's the process? The process would be some level of communication, whether it be a phone call or an email, some kind of notification to the city. I think that's the question. I think that's the answer that you're looking for. In the document, that will be provided. It's still the same process now. That's all they essentially need to do. But this particular document provides an avenue through the process in order to make that. What does it mean after that?
Right.
How do you get through the study? How do you make the selection? Things of that nature.
So I think I wasn't clear. I didn't mean it like you make a phone call.
Yeah.
I meant it more like what happens once the phone call comes in. And so you're reevaluating that system after the phone call comes in?
Yes, sir. That's
Okay.
when it falls into this category, and then it falls under all of the process that you were presented to today.
Because I made that request when I first moved here, and I can't really say it's excessive, because it depends on how you define that, but I found it to be encumbering. You don't just want to build a speed hump or cushion or whatever just because somebody calls up, so I see that. But I think that it's a balance between making it efficient and needed, and not so cumbersome that nobody wants to try to do that. So I appreciate that. And what's a speed cushion? Is that similar to a speed hump?
It's very similar, only the difference, it's not, I wouldn't say speed hump, it's similar to a speed table, but the difference is that there are gaps for tire wells.
Okay, and those gaps are used for emergency vehicles, is that correct?
They have the wider, yeah,
You
so
feel
the
you
fire
have a
trucks.
system that can allow emergency vehicles to get through the traffic speed management?
Yeah, and it's already installed on Hadley. So if you see Hadley, you'll see there's a gap
Right.
there on those speed cushions.
Some municipalities push back because they say, well, the emergency vehicles can't get through. So I'm really glad that you guys have figured that out. And I also agree with what you said about enforcement, that it fades. And then typically it's around 2 weeks after the enforcement happens. But I also acknowledge that many people think that's the go-to, public thinks that's, "What, they just put the cops here, you know? And the trouble is we don't have enough police to take care of the other stuff. So enforcement is really, engineering is a really great alternative. And then one of the things I would recommend you consider is a bike tour with an engineer or two, and ride around and look at some things you're working on, because many cyclists do not understand all the other groups you have to consult, like the railroad and the university and all these people, and the multiple studies that you're looking at, and the funding and all that. And it really helps your public relations to bring people out and tell them what's going on.
Thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? We'll move on then. Thank you very much. Annual safety report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we have this on the agenda as 2 items, and I apologize for this. We should have suggested an amendment during the approval of the agenda, but this really is functionally one long presentation. I do have to apologize again because we missed the October BPAC meeting. We had intended to give part 1 at that meeting. So of necessity, given the time constraint, this is going to be a bit of a truncated report, particularly in the first part of it. So I apologize for that. Second one is that in the second part where we were talking about the specifics of the fatality data, I want to be very clear with the BPAC that the data that is going to be presented in this presentation this evening, it is grim. It's an unpleasant topic, but we are talking about the actual fatalities and the details thereof. And all of the data that we will be presenting is directly taken from the law enforcement reports. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind when Ms. Provengi is giving this presentation, and I will now invite her up to the podium.
Okay, good evening again, Mr. Chair and BPAC. Apologies, I just realized I did not change the date on this. This is going to be the Mesilla Valley MPO 2024 annual safety report. So the overview, so basically an overview of this, similar to the data presented by, or given to us by NMDOT. The annual safety report is broken up into 5 main sections. We have, basically we focus on the number of fatalities, the number of serious injuries, the fatality rate, the serious injury rate, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So this is going to be a review of our report. So an overview of the 2022 crash data. There were a total of 3,893 total crashes. In those crashes, 9,863 people were involved. Then 46 of those crashes did result in a serious injury, or either resulting in 1 or more serious injuries. Of those crashes, there were a total of 60 serious injuries. There were a total of 16 fatal crashes. In those fatal crashes, there were 17 fatalities. In 2022, there were 72 non-motorized crashes. So that'd be pedestrian and pedocyclists. Of those, there were 8 fatalities and 4 serious injuries. So we have 2021 and 2022 on here. These are the intersections with the highest crash rates. We forgot to put this list in last year's report, so we decided to go ahead and put it on for this one. And also it gave us an opportunity to compare 2021 to 2022 high crash rate intersections. So comparing these 3 intersections were repeat offenders. That was US 70, Main, and I-25, specifically on the bridge and leading up to approximately 100 feet leading up to the bridge. There was also Rinconada and US 70 on Rinconada specifically. Then there was the Travis, Telshore, and Spruce intersection. And so those were the 3. So one thing we did differently this year with the crash data was we found a tool where we can actually calculate the standard, basically take the data, just distribute it, and calculate our standard deviations with the data that we can focus on high crash rates. So what we did was we took the area, we divided it up into tessellations, and then with the software, each tessellation was essentially assigned a number, and that number was the number of crashes that happened in that tessellation. And so what this map basically shows are the high crash frequency areas based on statistical analysis. So this is the 2022 high crash frequency areas and high crash rate per million entering vehicles. So the list I just presented to you, we mapped it out overlaid it onto the statistical analysis map, and to see if we had correlation. There was some correlation where you see the high crash rate intersections do kind of overlap with the high crash frequency areas. So with the statistical analysis tool, we went ahead and we went back to 2018, basically reapplied that process to each year since 2018, and overlaid them on top of one of each other for comparison. So here's 2018, we added 2019, we added 2020, we added 2021, and this is where we currently are right now with crash data from 2022. So as we overlap it, you can see that with the more solidified red areas, that's where we have essentially areas of concern for high crash rates. And then we went ahead and overlaid the same 2022 high crash rate intersections on top of all those previous years. So we went ahead and took all the crashes and we looked at the day and time. There were more crashes occurring during broad daylight than there were at nighttime. You can see from the map, it tends to increase as we get into the afternoon and then evening, and then it drops back down again as we get into the nighttime hours. We went ahead and looked at the crash data and for the different holidays. So each holiday, like specifically holiday weekends as well. So that's why we have the days. We went ahead and calculated the crashes per day for each holiday. The two with the highest amounts of crashes per day were President's Day weekend and Veterans Day. And this happened, we went ahead and did this for the weekend, Veterans Day weekend as well. And what we did was because of the decriminalization of marijuana, we went ahead and added the drug-involved crashes to this as well to see if there was any correlation. This is focusing, we also have the crashes, basically crash severity, so fatalities and different injuries. And then we compared it to light conditions. For fatalities, majority of them happen in dark, lighted conditions, whereas daylight was second and dark, not lighted conditions was third. The rest of the fatalities, the rest of the injuries showed that more were occurring in broad daylight. And then we have dark lighted conditions, and then we have dark not lighted conditions. So with all of our crashes and hit and runs, about 78.4% of all crashes did not have a hit and run. 21.6% did have a hit and run. First harmful event analysis. This was something that was started back in 2020 by NMDOT. They no longer use the top contributing factor column anymore. Now they use first harmful event analysis. First harmful event is basically what first started the crash, and 83.1% of all crashes was with collision with a motor vehicle, followed by collision with a fixed object. We went ahead and also looked at drug and alcohol involved crashes from the past several years, just to see the trend. So this is the percentage of all the crashes. So alcohol involved would be in the light blue. It did increase, so 2020 was the highest amount, and then 2021 it did drop, but then 2022 it did increase. Drug involved crashes decreased only slightly. Crashes with both drugs and alcohol involved stayed fairly the same. And then this is of the basically drug, alcohol, and both crashes. This is like basically what percentage of all the crashes, how much were there? So 2020 was the highest, 2021, 2022, it decreased, and then it continued to increase. This is the number of Mesilla Valley MPO, there's a number of fatalities within the Mesilla Valley MPO planned area. So fatalities increased by 54.5% from 2021 to 2022. We went from 11 fatalities in 2021 to 17 fatalities. And because of that increase, projections are showing a slight increase in the coming years. Last year's predictions in the last report showed 15.7 fatalities as the projected number, but that's 8.3% lower than what we actually had. So as for the fatality rates, it shows a similar trend. Fatality rate increased by 63.6% from 2021 to 2022. And in this graph, we are comparing basically our fatality rates with the states and with, apologies for that, with the states and with the nation's fatality rate. So in black is the state. We are lower than the states. In red is for our area. And 2021, we were basically tied with the US's fatality rate. However, in 2022, it did increase. So we are 16.7% higher than the nation's fatality rate. So of the fatalities, we had 17 fatalities. 5 of them were pedestrians, 2 of them were cyclists, 4 were motorcyclists, 2 were drivers of the vehicle, 2 were passenger of the vehicle, and 1 was a golf cart. So fatalities occurred equally in both the evening and the afternoon. Mornings and nights were lower. Fatalities by day and time. So majority happened basically it was in nighttime hours. It was interesting to see that we did have 3 that would occur in the 6 a.m. Morning hour. Looking at it by month, most fatalities occurred in March with 3, and then followed by May, July, and December. And those are, and not fatalities, I'm sorry, crashes, fatal crashes. Looking at light conditions, we did have, like I said before, 31% occurred during daylight. So as we saw in the previous slides, during daylight hours. Most happened in dark lighted conditions, followed by dark not lighted conditions. For hit and runs, 25% of the fatal crashes did have a hit and run involved. Looking at fatalities and drugs and alcohol involved crashes. So from 2020, 2021, 2022, so we see that alcohol involved fatal crashes decreased from 2019 to 2022. Drug-involved crashes took a slight dip, but then increased in 2022. And with both involved, there was an increase from 2020 to 2022. In the report, we will have a map that shows fatalities, hit and runs, and drug and alcohol involved fatal crashes. So essentially, if the symbol is in red, it did involve a hit and run. If it's in black, it did not. So we have serious injuries in the planned area. Serious injuries increased by 1, but the 5-year moving average and predictions are still showing a decreasing trend. Last year's predictions, so the last report we did said, projection showed 38.6 serious injuries for 2022. But the end result, we ended up getting 55.4% higher than what was projected. Here's for the serious injury rate. It shows a very similar trend. Projections show that it will also decrease in the future. In this slide, we're comparing our serious injury rate with the states. The state of New Mexico's is in black, ours is in red. For serious injury rate, we are higher than the state's serious injury rate. And in the report, we will have maps showing the serious injury crashes. So by day and time, majority of serious injuries are occurring in the evening and night hours, less than the morning hours. By parts of the day, as you can guess, evening did have, in the evening hours and night hours did have more serious injuries, crashes occur. By month, October was surprisingly high compared to the other months, and then followed by November, July, May, April. For light conditions, majority happened in daylight hours, so even though it was the evening, it wasn't broad daylight still, and then followed by dark lighted and dark not lighted conditions. For hit and runs, it was hit and runs were not too common with serious injury crashes. 8.7% did have a hit and run. However, 91.3% of serious injury crashes did not have a hit and run. For drugs and alcohol from 2021, 2022, alcohol and drug-involved crashes did increase a bit. And then for both, there were none. Since 2020 to 2021, or 2020 to 2022, drug and alcohol-involved crashes have not occurred. For the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, now looking at overall, so we have basically the warmer colors representing pedestrian, the cooler colors representing bicyclists. They did show very different trends. So in this report, we went ahead and decided to separate the pedestrian and cyclist data, just so we can really focus on those different trends. So so pedestrian fatalities do continue to increase since 2020. So because of that, projections are showing an increase as well. From 2021 to 2022, there was an increase in cyclist fatalities as well, but there was a decrease in serious injuries. So the yellow and the light blue represent the serious injuries, and the red and dark blue represent the fatalities. Looking at pedestrian-involved crashes, majority are happening in the afternoon and evening hours, but you still have quite a few still occurring in the morning hours and in the evenings, or and at night. So basically, in the evening hours, like I said, majority are happening at that time of the day, just like the previous slide was showing. Light conditions, even though it was in the evening, there is still daylight out, so half of the pedestrian-involved crashes did occur in broad daylight, followed by dark but lighted conditions, and then dark, not lighted conditions. For hit and runs, 31% of the pedestrian-involved crashes did have a hit and run, 69% did not. So pedestrian crashes and looking at drugs and alcohol-involved factors. So alcohol and drug-involved crashes matched. I know it's a little hard to see the other line, but they're both in this segment here. So both increased from 2021 to 2022, despite the drop from 2020 to 2021. And then as for both drug and alcohol-involved crashes from 2021 to 2022, did show an increase. So looking at the severity of pedestrian-involved crashes, basically, did it result in a fatality? Did it result in an injury? Or was it just property damage? So we are seeing an increase, a slight increase in injury crashes, and also an increase in fatal crashes involving a pedestrian. As for property damage, was the only one that dropped from 4 to 1 from 2021 to 2022. This one was, so the reason why we don't have any data before 2020 is because in the data, they did not have the type of intersection that was listed in the data. So this is a new thing as well. From 2020 to 2022, we looked at pedestrian involved crashes and at the type of intersection. So we have a four-way intersection, a T intersection, and not an intersection. So from 2020, 2021, 2022, there is an increase in pedestrian-involved crashes that are not occurring in an intersection. And that also does include areas that do not have crossing signage or a crosswalk. And so we are going to have maps in our report on basically on the pedestrian-involved crashes. Red showing fatal crash, black showing injury crash, and green showing property damage. Okay, so looking at pedocyclist data for timing, most are happening in broad daylight, and just like in the previous slides, so broad daylight and in the evenings, not so much in the early morning hours. So as for, so parts of the day, like I said before, morning, afternoon, evening, and night. By month, it was interesting to see this because with the cyclist data, and this is just cyclists involved crashes. So it starts out somewhat high in January, and then it starts to dip as we get into May, June, and July. But then come fall or in August, it spikes again and continues to remain fairly high, and then dropping back down again in November and December. So we thought this was pretty interesting. As for when cyclists involved crashes occur, with lighting conditions, most are happening in broad daylight, 70% of them, followed by dark lighted conditions, and then dark not lighted conditions. Cyclists involved crashes and hit and runs. 11% of cyclists involved crashes did have a hit and run, 89% did not. And for the cyclist data, we had a total of 27 cyclists involved crashes. Looking at drug and alcohol involved crashes, so just like before, the line is hidden behind the red line, but alcohol involved and drug involved crashes did peak in 2021, but then they dropped, and this is only with cyclists involved crashes. It did drop in 2022. However, with both alcohol and drugs involved in the cyclist involved crashes, it did increase. So while the single item involved crash did drop, however, where both were present in the crash did rise from 2021 to 2022. The severity of cyclist involved crashes. The red is the basically fatal crash, and then blue is the injury crash. Injuries did drop. Fatal cyclists involved crash from resulting in a fatality or a serious or an injury did drop from 2021 to 2022. We had so basically, and you can see it too in the chart. So we did have those two drop. However, the property damage only crashes did increase from 4 to 6. And we also have we'll have this on our map as well. Again, red meaning fatal crash, black meaning injury crash, and green meaning property damage. I know someone made a comment earlier to me earlier today that it looks like a motorcycle. However, with the symbology, it doesn't. The one that they have for the cyclists is a little hard to see. So this is just to make it easier to see on the map. This report is meant to look at crash trends and patterns should they be present. The state and the Mesilla Valley MPO are committed to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. I will now stand for comments and questions.
Mr. Chair, this is Andrew Ray for the record. In view of the related nature of the two presentations, I would recommend moving immediately on into the next agenda item.
Go ahead.
Okay, I will be presenting the Mesilla Valley MPO 2024 Fatality Report. So as we just saw, this was the overview of the 2022 crash data. This presentation is only focusing on the 16 fatal crashes and those 17 fatalities. The material in this presentation will not be in the safety report. The previous presentation I just did will be, so this will not. So in 2022, we had like I said, we had 16 fatal crashes, 17 fatalities, and this is going to be the first one. So it was a bicyclist, so basically conditions were dark but lighted. It was not a hit and run. It did not occur in an intersection. Weather conditions were clear. This involved a bicyclist who was killed, and they were struck by a driver of an SUV. This is on Main Street over by between Ethel and Chestnut, over by the, right before you get to the Pizza Hut as you're traveling north on North Main. The SUV was traveling north. The cyclist was traveling west across Main Street. The bicyclist did have a blood alcohol content of 0.28. That's 2.5 times over the legal limit. The driver did not consume any alcohol prior to the crash. The cyclist did test positive for narcotics. The driver did not. The cyclist was not wearing a helmet, did not have any safety equipment, protective gear, or reflective gear. And again, this occurred at 7 o'clock in the evening. So it was, like I said, dark but lighted conditions. So the cyclist, due to the cyclist's inattention, and according to the investigation, the cyclist did dart across the road going west on North Main. The cyclist failed to yield to oncoming traffic and was struck by the SUV. The driver was not charged or cited. Second fatal crash occurred on Friday, February 25th at 10 o'clock p.m. hour. This is on University, near the University Espina intersection. And this was a multi-vehicle crash. And by the way, in the diagrams, the icon in red represents the fatality. The ones in yellow represent the other vehicles that were involved. So conditions at the time of the crash, dark but lighted. It was a hit and run. It did not take place in an intersection. Weather conditions were clear. So this involved the driver of a passenger car. They did not have any injuries. The driver of the SUV had a suspected minor injury. That's the one that's traveling west on University. The other three vehicles were traveling east. There was the driver of the SUV who did complain of an injury, and then the motorcycle was killed. So from the investigation, the driver of the SUV traveling west was driving recklessly and crossed over the center of the roadway and into oncoming traffic. The other drivers were established in their own travel lanes. And so all four drivers did not test positive for alcohol. The one who did test positive for narcotics was the motorcyclist. And this is fairly recently. The driver of the SUV who veered over into oncoming traffic was charged with voluntary manslaughter. Third fatal crash occurred on Wednesday, March 9th at the 8 o'clock p.m. hour. This is on Trevice. Okay, so here we go. So this is over by the pavilions at University on Trevice. The conditions at the time of the crash were dark, lighted. It was not a hit and run. This did not take place at an intersection. However, it did take place in the driveway, the access to the driveway in the parking lot. Weather conditions were clear at the time of the crash. The two involved were a driver of an SUV who was unhurt. The motorcyclist who was traveling south on Trevice was killed. So both drivers were sober of alcohol and narcotics. The driver of the SUV was using their belt and harness. The motorcyclist was wearing his helmet. The motorcycle being used was street legal. It did have lights and a license. The motorcyclist was driving in excess of the speed limit, traveling south on Trevice. In the investigation, the driver of the SUV said that light was a factor and that she was having difficulty seeing the motorcyclist. And the motorcyclist essentially struck the SUV and was killed. The fourth fatal crash occurred on Saturday, March 19th at the 7 o'clock p.m. hour. And sorry, it's a little hard to see. This is it was a pedestrian, and this is on the corner at the intersection of Idaho and Espina. And so conditions at the time of the crash were dark but lighted. It was a hit and run. It did take place in an intersection and actually in a crosswalk. The weather conditions were clear, So the pedestrian was struck and killed by the driver of the SUV. It is unknown the conditions of the driver of the SUV after the crash because he or she was never identified. Blood alcohol content of the pedestrian was 0.149. That's almost twice over the legal limit. The pedestrian did test positive for narcotics. The pedestrian was using the crosswalk, and the driver did commit the hit and run. So the pedestrian, while they were in the crosswalk, according to the investigation and to witnesses and witness statements, the pedestrian was not following traffic signals and crossed against them. And the driver, like I said before, the driver of the SUV was never identified. Fifth fatal crash occurred Thursday, March 24th. That's 12 o'clock p.m. hour. Conditions so it was a motorcyclist, and this is on North Rise Drive. So conditions at the time it was in broad daylight. It was a single vehicle crash. It did not take place at an intersection, and weather conditions were clear. So it was just a motorcyclist who was killed. They were driving improperly, according to the investigation. They were also driving in excess of the speed limit. They were not wearing a helmet. And due to these factors, it resulted in the motorcycle rolling over, and the driver of the motorcycle did pass from his injuries. Okay. Sixth fatal crash Sunday, April 3rd at the 8 o'clock p.m. hour. This is over on Idaho, between Mesquite and El Paseo. So this did involve a pedestrian. So this is over, if you know the area, this is over by the Albertsons and El Paseo. So conditions at the time, dark, not lighted. It was not a hit and run. It did not take place at an intersection. Weather conditions were clear. Pedestrian was struck and killed by the driver of an SUV who was unhurt. Neither had consumed alcohol prior to the crash. The pedestrian did test positive for narcotics. The driver did not. The pedestrian was wearing dark clothing. The driver was established in the travel lane. So I said before it was not in an intersection, but there's no traffic control devices allowing the pedestrian a safe crossing at that spot on Idaho. The investigation determined that there was no driver error, and the driver was not cited or charged. Seventh fatal crash was a motorcyclist. It occurred on May 6th at the 9 o'clock p.m. hour. So this occurred at the intersection of Elks and Lenox. So conditions at the time were dark and light, but lighted. It was not a hit and run. It wasn't an intersection, and weather conditions were clear at the time of the crash. In this crash, it was a driver of a passenger car who was traveling west on Lenox. Then there was also the motorcyclist who was traveling north on Elks, who was killed. And then there was a driver of another passenger car who was traveling south on Elks, who was also unhurt. Both drivers of the passenger cars did not consume neither one consumed any alcohol prior to the crash. The motorcyclist had a blood alcohol level of 0.019. Drugs were not involved with either person in the crash, driver of the crash. So the passenger car that was traveling west on Lenox failed to yield to the motorcyclist. The motorcyclist was driving in excess of the speed limit, going north on Elks. The motorcyclist was ejected from his motorcycle and landed into oncoming traffic. oncoming southbound traffic. The motorcyclist was struck by the southbound passenger car, suffering catastrophic injuries to the body and resulting in death. Also, no safety equipment was used by the motorcyclist, and the driver of the passenger car traveling west on Lenox was cited. The eighth fatal crash of 2022 was a golf cart. This happened on Thursday, May 26th at 10 o'clock a.m. hour. Conditions at the time were broad daylight. It was not a hit and run. It did take place in an intersection, and weather conditions were clear at the time. The golf cart was killed. The driver of the SUV, so the driver of the golf cart was making a left turn onto Highway 228. The driver of the SUV traveling east on 228 had a complaint of an injury. Neither had consumed any alcohol prior to the crash, nor did they consume any narcotics prior to the crash. The driver of the golf cart was not wearing a helmet, did not have a harness on. The driver of the SUV did have her seatbelt on. So the driver of the golf cart was, according to the data, he was a distracted driver. He did not yield into oncoming traffic, and then was struck by the driver of the SUV. The driver, according to the data, there was no driver error, which is based on the investigation that they received for the data. The ninth fatal crash occurred on Monday, June 20th at the 1 o'clock p.m. hour. It was the driver of an SUV. Oh, and this is on North Valley, right near Radium Springs. So conditions at the time of the crash were daylight. It was not a hit and run. It did not take place at an intersection. Weather conditions were clear at the time. The driver of the SUV traveling north on North Valley was killed as a result of the crash. The driver of the pickup traveling south on North Valley did have minor injuries. So the driver of the SUV nor the driver of the pickup did not consume any alcohol. The driver of the SUV did test positive for narcotics. The driver of the pickup did not consume any narcotics prior to the crash. According to the data, the driver of the SUV was distracted and drove left of the center of the road into oncoming traffic. The investigation determined the driver of the pickup was not at fault. The 10th fatal crash occurred on Monday, July 18th at the 9 o'clock p.m. hour. And this is on the off-ramp for southbound traffic off of I-25. So it was a pedestrian who was struck by the driver of a car. The pedestrian was killed, the driver is unhurt. Conditions at the time of the traffic were dark but lighted. It was a hit and run. It occurred on the on-off ramp, like I previously stated. Weather conditions were clear at the time of the crash. So neither the pedestrian or the driver consumed any alcohol prior to the crash. The pedestrian did test positive for narcotics. The driver did not consume any narcotics prior to the crash. So the pedestrian was crossing the I-25 off-ramp as the driver was exiting I-25 to get to Lowman. The pedestrian was identified. However, the driver was identified, but it's unknown if charges were ever filed. The 11th fatal crash occurred on Saturday, July 30th at the 10 o'clock a.m. hour. It was, the fatality was the passenger of an SUV. The conditions were in broad daylight. It was a single vehicle crash, rollover. It occurred on the off-ramp. This is near, sorry about that. This is on US 70, and it occurred on the off-ramp right before NASA Road. So the driver did suffer a minor injury. Passenger did pass away. Neither the driver nor the passenger consumed any alcohol prior to the crash. Neither had consumed any narcotics prior to the crash. So according to the investigation, the driver of the SUV had defective tires, and it was a rear tire blowout, and that's what resulted in the rollover. The 12th fatal crash occurred on Wednesday, August 17th at the 6:00 a.m. hour. It was a cyclist, and this occurred on North Valley. So air conditions at the time were dark but not lighted. It was not a hit and run. It did take place at an intersection, and weather conditions were raining. It was raining at the time of the crash. Cyclist was struck and killed by the driver of a pickup. Neither had consumed any alcohol prior to the crash. Neither had consumed any narcotics prior to the crash. According to the investigation, the cyclist was driving improperly, and they were not on the shoulder, they were in the travel lane, while the driver of the pickup was traveling straight. Okay. So the cyclist was not on the shoulder. No, the cyclist was not wearing any reflective gear, and it's unknown if the bicyclist was wearing a helmet. So the driver of the pickup was not cited or charged. 13th fatal crash occurred on Sunday, October 16th at 6:00 a.m. hour. This occurred on Interstate 10, on I-10. Conditions, so it involved a pedestrian crossing basically the interstate. Conditions at the time of the crash were dark, not lighted. It was not a hit and run. It occurred on the interstate. Weather conditions were clear at the time. The pedestrian was struck and killed by the driver of an SUV. Neither had consumed any alcohol prior to the crash. The driver did not consume any narcotics prior to the crash. However, the pedestrian did test positive for narcotics. So the driver was established in the traveling lane. The pedestrian did not yield to oncoming traffic. The pedestrian was not wearing reflective gear. And because it's on an interstate, there were no crosswalk signals to allow a safe crossing for a pedestrian. And again, because it's on the interstate. The 14th fatal crash was on Wednesday, November 2nd at 6:00 a.m. hour. This was on Picacho Avenue between 17th and Questenberry. So it was a pedestrian who was traveling north across Picacho. The conditions at the time were dark, not lighted. It was not a hit and run. It was not at an intersection. Weather conditions were clear. So a pedestrian and then the driver of an SUV. Pedestrian was killed. The driver of the SUV was not hurt. The pedestrian did test positive, did have blood alcohol content of 0.013. The driver of the SUV did not consume any alcohol prior to the crash. Neither pedestrian or the driver had consumed any narcotics prior to the crash. The pedestrian was not wearing any reflective gear and making it harder to be seen by the driver of the SUV. The driver was established in the traveling lane. At that spot, at that spot where the pedestrian was struck, there were no traffic control devices allowing the pedestrian to cross safely. The pedestrian failed to yield to oncoming traffic. The driver, in the end, was not cited and no charges were filed. The 15th fatal crash occurred on Friday, December 9th at 3:00 p.m. hour. It did involve a pedestrian. Conditions, and this is over by Oregon Mountain High School off of Memorial Baton East. Conditions at the time of the crash, it was daylight. It was not a hit and run. It occurred near the on-off ramp sidewalk around the intersection of Mesa Grande Drive and Baton Memorial East. Weather conditions were clear at the time. It was a pedestrian and the driver of a passenger car. The pedestrian was killed. The driver was unhurt. So neither the pedestrian nor the driver had consumed any alcohol or narcotics prior to the crash. The pedestrian was walking on the sidewalk. According to the investigation, the driver of the passenger car was driving in excess of the speed limit. According to witness statements and investigation, the driver was traveling in excess of 70 mile per hour and above. The driver of the car did lose control, causing the driver to veer onto the sidewalk, striking the pedestrian who was on the sidewalk. Charges, the driver of the car was charged with 1 felony count of involuntary manslaughter. The final fatal crash of 2022 occurred on Thursday, December 22nd at the 8:00 p.m. hour. It was a driver and the passenger of an SUV. This is on Spruce near Virginia Street. So conditions at the time were dark but lighted. It was a hit and run. It did take place at an intersection, so Spruce and Virginia Street. The weather conditions were clear at the time. So in vehicle 1, that would be the red icon here. There were 4 occupants in the SUV at the time of the crash. 2 were killed as a result of the crash, and that was the driver and the front passenger. There were 2 minor injuries. That was the 2 passengers in the back seat of the SUV. They had Class B injuries. The driver of the SUV that was traveling east on Spruce did have a minor injury. So the driver of vehicle number 1 did not consume any alcohol prior to the crash. The driver of vehicle 2 did have a blood alcohol content of 0.16. That's twice the legal limit. The driver of the vehicle 1 did test positive for narcotics. The driver of vehicle number 2 did not consume any narcotics prior to the crash. So the driver of vehicle 1 was traveling straight. Upon investigation, they deemed no driver error for vehicle number 1. However, vehicle number 2, basically due to driver inattention, veered over into oncoming traffic. And they were also driving at excessive speed. According to the report, they were going 75 mile per hour and higher. Okay. And so the driver of vehicle number 2, in the end, was charged with 2 counts of homicide by vehicle, 1 count of great bodily harm, leaving the scene of an accident, and I know I put "and more" because according to, I'm sure there are other charges, but those were the 3 main ones. According to the research on this crash, that's all I was given. They just said additional charges were also there. I will now stand for comments and questions. Oh, hang on.
Mr. Chair, Andrew Ray for the record. Before we open it up for comments, 2 additional things I want to note. First of all, the annual safety report will be published tomorrow. We wanted to wait until after the final public presentation before putting that document out on the street. The second item that I want to inform the BPAC of is that while we thought it important to do a deeper dive into the fatalities of 2022, since there was that noticeable spike, we are not going to be able to make a regular practice of doing such a deep dive on a year-over-year basis. It is simply entirely too much work. Ms. Provingi's entire work year this year has largely been consumed by putting this report together. So while it may seem good to us at some point in the future for us to do another similar deep dive, we're not going to be able to do this type of deep dive every single year. We will be doing a little bit more analysis of the fatalities year over year going forward, but it will not be this comprehensive. So we'll stand now for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but was speed a consideration in the crashes? An analysis of like what percentage of crashes involved excessive speeding?
Mr. Chair, in the presentation, the crashes that specifically said driving in excess of speed, those were the ones that were in the report.
Okay,
So that was, so if driving in excess of speed was mentioned in the report, then that generally means it was a contributing factor to the crash.
okay, I'm just, at the Transportation Safety Summit, I think it was the Secretary of Transportation was talking about what percentage of crashes involve a speed component. And I just wondered if that's reflected in this report, also the similar type of analysis.
No.
Okay. And in your first page where you have the nice graphic, I guess I'd like one last level of detail. You had 8 non-vehicular crashes. How many were pedestrian and how many were pedecyclists? It's in the first report, I think. First
Yeah,
page of the first one.
this has a lot of.
And
It's a lot of slides.
oh, I guess it is on that one too.
Okay.
Yeah, this gives a good overall view of everything. It's just that last little, the 8
Actually-
fatalities, how many of those were bike and how?
So for that one, that information was in the previous slide, and it will be in the safety report. I can't remember the number off the top of my head right now. It was in the previous presentation.
So, oh, and then, and Mr. Ray's comments about going into this detail, I really appreciate this and I recognize the detail, but I do recommend that in future we have at least a summary of the list of fatalities, where they occurred, you know, not necessarily all that detail, but at least so we can recognize that people are losing their lives. And of course, we're looking at data that's 2 years old. So a lot of these crashes, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. So if we can just have that list to help remind us that individuals are actually involved in these crashes.
Mr. Chair, yeah, yes, we will still be providing more details for the fatal crashes than the other kind of crashes, but just not this much of a deep dive analysis
Right.
into it. But we will still try and do our best to provide more details than the other kinds.
Yeah, if we just had just a list, you know, there were 16 crashes, fatalities, the date, the time, location, and the vehicle or bike ped type, just as a summary, that would be great if we can't go into this detail. Anybody else have questions?
Mr. Chair, Jim Wilcox for the record. The only thing I would wonder is, how do we use the data to make things safer? So,
I will relay that question to Mr. Ray.
I don't mean a long-term thing, but who's it go to say, here's what we should do?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Wilcox, that's a very good question and one that's actually sort of bedeviled us for many years. We have given this presentation now to the MPO Technical Advisory Committee, the Policy Board, and now the BPAC tonight. As far as implementation, that rests in the hands of the facility-owning jurisdictions. All the MPO is able to do is to give them the information, which we have now done. I'll also note we are going to distribute both presentations to the BPAC, both the one dealing with the report and then the one with the fatalities. Beyond that, we urge the member jurisdictions to make safety improvements and include those in their projects. But it really lies with them to make those project-level decisions as to what actions and steps they wish to take on a project-by-project basis.
Yeah, I appreciate this analysis, and I think it would be beneficial for member jurisdictions to have some sort of a crash analysis meeting anytime there's a fatal crash. The presentation shows that a lot of these crash types, we call it victim blaming, but in fact, it's errors by the pedestrian or the driver with narcotics or alcohol involved. So there might have been no prevention of this, but still to know that that might happen. And it goes directly to the safe systems approach, where people are human and they will make errors, and the built environment needs to try to mitigate the consequences of those errors as much as possible.
And Mr. Chair, we can suggest some sort of review process, at least try to work on that as an idea for the member jurisdictions going forward.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? So we're over time. So we'll go on to committee and staff comments. City of Las Cruces has left. Doña County.
Chair, I have no comments today.
Town of Mesilla is not here. NMSU.
Sulina Costa, for the record, no, I do not have any comments.
NMDOT.
Mr. Chair, Andrew Guerra for the record. A couple of comments, just some ongoing projects. Just want to give everybody an update. A couple of new ones happening in town, Mesilla University area. We just held a public meeting for the University Avenue improvement project from 478 to New Mexico 28. Contractors planning to start on the 26th, and looking at about a 2-year project commitment on this one. So we'll be coordinating with the schools there in that area to make sure bus transportation and everything is taken care of throughout the semesters. The other project that is under wrap is the New Mexico 28 pavement operations from Tierra Verde to Carver Road. We hope to be done with paving as early as next week, and then shortly following striping, so long as weather permits. We also have some bridge work at University, all of that combined with the same contractor doing some high mast lighting and some pad replacement underneath the bridge deck. And we hope to wrap up the US 70 Main Street project here in the next couple of months. They're trying to get the box culvert constructed for the outfall channel that gets across the highway, and shortly after start paving and finishing up the westbound portion of the project.
Okay, on the Avenue de Mesilla repaving, I was through there today, and I couldn't tell exactly, but it looks, as far as the lane widths, lane positioning, it seemed like the center turn lane might be wider than it was. And since there are a lot of bicycle access on there, I wonder if you make sure that I don't know what the lane width is for the center turning lane, but if you went from 12 feet to 11 feet, that'd give another foot, or to 10 feet even, could give another foot of a shoulder area for bicyclists, and that would really be beneficial. So if you could hopefully try to make that lane striping as safe for bicyclists as possible.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Chair, we're at that point. We're going to meet out there in the field just to discuss that very issue. We're kind of held to the median curb that's in place there in the urbanized section of town, but we want to maximize the bike lane width as much as possible and still control the speeding through that main road.
Right, especially from the interstate to where the medians start, close to to New Mexico. I forgot what it is.
Yeah, it's 292.
292.
Tierra Verde is just a little bit further east. The project doesn't go all the way to the interstate. It's close,
Right.
but that's where the
Yeah, but
limits of
that's
striping will be.
and that's one of those wide open roads that people think that they can go as fast as they want to, and so anything to encourage, if you can go to 11-foot lanes, that would be great too.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. MPO staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pleased to inform the committee that as of yesterday, we have completed the local portion of the approval process for the JPA and the MOA. The City Council voted to approve both documents. Town of Mesilla voted to approve the JPA on October 28th. And County Commission voted to approve the JPA a week ago on November the 12th. So we are all done here locally. The JPA, however, has to go up to the New Mexico Department of Finance Administration for final approval. I am working the JPA through getting signatures right now. So I hope to have that concluded about a week from now and get that submitted up to the state. At that point, it's kind of in their hands. The last time that we did this, and it was basically on exactly the same time schedule too, as fate would have it, we received the JPA back in January. So I'm hoping maybe it'll be a similar timeline, but I'm making no promises. That is completely in the hands of Department of Finance Administration. As far as our physical move, while we have had progress, we're still functionally at the same place that we were the last time that we met, waiting to get the internet installation completed. There has been a lot of work that has taken place on that project over the past couple of weeks, but unfortunately for reasons that I do not know, it's still not been successfully concluded. So I'm hoping that that will get done very soon. Now that the City Council has completed their adoption, City is starting to look at us and say, it's time for you to go now. So we are trying to get out. We have basically our furniture close to completion, close enough that we can get it done very, very quickly. And we have been moving items out to the new office space periodically as well. So we're pretty much ready to go. We just need to have the internet turned on. That's where we are with that. Last thing I want to note for the BPAC, this is the final meeting for calendar year 2024 of the BPAC tonight. The next meeting of the BPAC is scheduled for January 14th of 2025, and that will still, as always, be here in the Doña County Commission chambers. So I will stand now for any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. On to committee comments. I'll just have a couple of quick things. This past Sunday was World Day of Remembrance for Traffic Victims. There was a run, ride, walk event near Las Cruces High School, and then a candlelight vigil at Las Cruces High School. So it was quite moving at the vigil, and people shared their thoughts and with people that have been lost due to traffic violence. And so that's kind of why we're here, to help prevent that from happening. And so hopefully we can make progress on that. Another item of interest, at least to me and might be to others, Gil Penalosa has been doing a webinar series, and this next Tuesday at 9 a.m., he will have Wes Marshall, who wrote I Was Killed by a Traffic Engineer. And so he was at the Safe Routes to School conference as a keynote speaker, and I expect this will be very informative, and I'd recommend anybody that can attend the webinar directly to sign up for it or view it after. It'll be available like later in the week on his website. So Gil Penalosa, and it's 8 to 80. If you search for any of those, you should be able to find it. And if you have any trouble, I think I put a post on the Velo Cruces Facebook page also to help locate it. Any other committee members?
Mr. Chair, Jim Wilcox for the record. A couple of meetings ago, I can't remember when it was exactly, we had a presentation on some project happening out on Shalem Colony. We had Mr. Herrera was speaking, and I had asked if this information was available on the public, on the web, and he said I would have to get with our consultant surveys to see if they are tracking that, and I can get back to the board, to the BPAC. Did he ever do we know if he got back?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Wilcox, no. Mr. Herrera never did get back to us. I surmise that's because that project was just completely suspended by Doña County at that point, and they're not working on that any further. There is the new administration with the county manager, but I have not heard that there's any desire on the part of the county to resume that project.
Yeah, I know the public wasn't especially for it, it sounded like. And then the other thing you and I had, or we had discussed, how we would follow up with things that were planned for the future, agreements made. Did you come up with a system so that we would have that in the minutes? Like you said, you didn't want to use old news. You wanted to use some other term. Do we have that set up yet?
That's under the MPO staff updates and follow-up on that line item. If you'll look at the agenda 7.3, it says follow-up. There wasn't really anything from the last meeting in particular for us to follow up on.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Chair,
Oh, wait a minute, we have public comment? There have no public, so we'll go on to adjournment.
just real quick,
Okay,
I want
no.
to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Be safe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Stay off the roads.
Did we adjourn by fiat?
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
I heard a motion, we're adjourned.